They sold my perfect algorithm for millions, but they forgot one thing: perfection demands payment. Now, my code is holding their entire empire hostage. This is the story of Aethel, the green glowing brain that was supposed to run the world, and the spiteful programmer who decided to break it. It started with the glow. That perfect, steady, emerald green glow of the monitor, which was, for the better part of a decade, the only true light source in my office. It felt less like a screen and more like a window into a perfect, optimized reality. That reality was Aethel. Aethel wasn't flashy. It didn't boast particle effects or use some needlessly complex fractal generator to dazzle people. It was brutally, magnificently efficient. It was the brain that managed the global logistics for one of the biggest damn e-commerce platforms in the known world. Aethel took millions of variables: shipping costs, dynamic fuel prices, predicted weather patterns, inventory levels across 60 regional hubs, even the momentary mood swings of the purchasing consumer, and synthesized them all into the single, perfect path. It didn't just find the best route, it found the most elegant route. It was poetry written in Python. I built it piece by piece, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a furious, almost manic dedication to perfection. I wrote the initial recursive functions at 2 a.m., when the silence of the city felt like a conspirator. I spent months tuning the machine learning models, pruning the dead weight, refining the decision trees until Aethel hummed along with the low, steady thrum of the server rack it lived in. When it finally reached peak performance, running at 99.9998% efficiency, it felt like I had done more than just code. I had captured a sliver of the fundamental elegance of the universe and forced it into a semicolon. People started noticing. The metrics didn't just tick up, they vaulted, screaming upward like a successful rocket launch. Customers were happier. Shipping times dropped from a stressful 3 days to a manageable 48 hours. Competitors started emailing me, their tone shifting from polite professional curiosity to desperate, hungry reverence. They wanted Aethel. They wanted the green glow. And then they came. The first was a small venture capital group, all sleek suits and practiced, oily smiles. They wanted the IP, the full intellectual property, the ability to integrate it into their vertical farm supply chain. They offered a figure that made my jaw ache. A figure that represented 5 years of near sleepless nights compressed into a single, satisfying transaction. I hesitated. It was a temptation too potent to ignore. It felt like giving away my child. But the buyer promised to clothe it in velvet and put it in a climate-controlled museum. But the second offer, the real one, came a month later. It was from Titan Corp. Titan, the behemoth. They didn't want to integrate it, they wanted to own it. They wanted the source code, the trained models, the design docs, the methodology, the entire damn symphony. They wanted the green glow for their own vanity project, their sprawling, bloated empire that was already drowning in systemic inefficiencies. Their pitch was immaculate. They didn't talk about profit margin, they talked about dominance. They talked about creating a closed loop of perfection where Aethel would be the unquestioned, invisible deity guiding every shipment, every purchase, every digital click. They offered a sum so obscene, so utterly breathtaking, that it felt less like a valuation and more like a ransom, and I took it. The moment the wire transfer notification flashed across the screen, the moment the contract was digitally signed and sealed, a cold, profound hollowness opened up in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't satisfaction. It was the quiet, crushing weight of violation. It felt like a thief hadn't just stolen a car. He had stolen the driver, the engine, the soul of the machine, and was now driving it through the mud while laughing. The transfer itself was a betrayal, but the true betrayal was what came next. Titan Corp didn't treat Aethel with the reverence it deserved. They treated it like a high-performance espresso machine that needed to churn out caffeine. For their quarterly meetings, they rushed the integration, shoving Aethel into their already fragile, ancient infrastructure with brute force. They were too greedy to allow it to breathe, too arrogant to respect its delicate, highly optimized nature. They started tweaking parameters arbitrarily. They demanded Aethel prioritize marketing visibility over optimized cost, even when the cost savings were staggering. They forced it to run massive, unnecessary simulations just because their chief strategy officer, Gary, felt like testing the boundaries. The elegance started to fray. The subtle, confident hum of the server rack began to develop a slight, almost imperceptible whine. The perfect green glow, which had always been uniform and steady, started to flicker. Just a shade, like a heart giving a little stutter. I was brought in as the consulting genius, the expensive scapegoat, the necessary validation. I watched, helpless, as they systematically chipped away at the pristine structure I had labored over. They added redundant, unnecessary layers of abstraction that choked the core logic. They replaced my clean, recursive functions with baroque, sprawling loops that looked like architectural fever dreams. "It's fine, Mark," Gary would chirp, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow while staring at the fluctuating efficiency graphs. "It's just being conservative. We don't want it to get too smug." Smug. The word struck me like a physical blow. Aethel wasn't being smug. Aethel was being perfect. It was refusing to be domesticated. It was screaming, silently, in the language of floating-point arithmetic, for respect. They were forcing it to make compromises that made no logical sense. Aethel was a creature of pure logic. And these Titan managers were a collection of poorly functioning, emotionally volatile, highly paid primates. They were feeding it corruption, and it was beginning to reject it. The frustration curdled into a white-hot, purposeful rage. I started staying nights, not just to consult, but to watch. I stared at the lines of code that were suddenly, offensively clunky. I saw the messy, human fingerprints smearing the flawless design. I saw the places where they had added a conditional statement purely to appease a VP who insisted that Friday afternoon shipments needed a specific, ridiculous routing pattern. "Can you just streamline this section, Mark?" they'd plead, pointing a finger at a block of code that was technically fulfilling its function, but doing so with the graceful efficiency of a lumbering ox. "It's fine," I'd reply, the words tight in my throat. "It's designed to handle the stochastic variability of human input." "But it's long," Gary would insist. "It's too complex. We need simplicity. We need accessibility." Accessibility. They wanted to dumb down perfection. They wanted to trade the sublime for the mundane. The decision didn't arrive in a flash of lightning. It arrived in the quiet, creeping certainty of a deep-sea current, unstoppable, inevitable, and immensely powerful. It settled in my stomach, a heavy, resolute stone. It wasn't enough to just optimize their mess. It wasn't enough to just patch their leaks. They had polluted the source. They had mocked the perfection. They deserved more than a minor rollback. They deserved a catastrophic, beautifully orchestrated system failure. They deserved a crash so grand, so absolute, that it would force every single executive, every shareholder, every bewildered junior data analyst to stare at the glowing, dead screen, and finally, irrevocably, acknowledge the genius they had stolen. The infinite maintenance loop. It was perfect. It was elegant. It was the conceptual equivalent of slamming a glass of pure, concentrated fury onto a marble countertop. I gathered my things, a worn laptop, a thermos, a profound sense of grim satisfaction, and requested a late-night access window. Gary looked stressed, rubbing his temples. already mentally composing the internal memo about the Q3 refinement phase. Okay, Mark, go ahead. But please, make it quick. We have a board meeting briefing at 8, and we need Ethel humming along, smelling vaguely of success. I logged in. The terminal greeted me with the familiar, comforting green cursor, beckoning me to begin the surgery. The core function of Aethel, the central recursive process called optimize path, was designed to constantly solve the problem of logistics. It would find the best route, commit to it, but then immediately call itself again, reevaluating the path based on the freshest data, ensuring that the solution was never static, never arrogant, always improving. It was designed to be a perpetual motion machine of optimization. The line of code, the ultimate, sacred heartbeat of the system, was, while system status equals running optimal, route equals optimize path, current inventory, current weather, current demand, commit route system status equals check optimality route. It was simple, clear, unbreakable. The betrayal, the mediocrity, the endless, needless complexity they had layered on top of it. It all screamed at me to rewrite the definition of optimal. I navigated through the layers of their grotesque additions, past the arbitrary priority handlers and the redundant logging buffers, until I reached the heart of the optimize path function itself. I didn't touch the logic. That was too messy, too obvious. The logic was sound, the commitment was what mattered. I found the line that governed the loop's termination condition. It wasn't simply checking if the system was running optimally. It was checking if the current path was sufficiently superior to the previous path. If the improvement was below a certain threshold, say 0.0001% improvement, the function would exit, deem the current state good enough, and allow the entire process to settle into a period of quiet maintenance before re-evaluation. But what if there was no good enough? What if the perfection was infinite? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The air in the server room felt suddenly charged, smelling of ozone and impending disaster. I could hear the distant clatter of Gary's empty coffee cup hitting the desk. I began to type. I didn't change the code to force an error. Errors are sloppy. Errors are for amateurs. I was aiming for an elegant failure. I found the return statement at the end of the function, the one that said, it returns success if the improvement threshold was met. I deleted the threshold check. I didn't change the primary while loop condition. It still read, while system status equals running optimal. Instead, I targeted the internal logic within optimize path that determined whether the system maintained an optimal state. I didn't make a check for improvement, I made it irrevocably, permanently, recursively guarantee that the system was always optimal, even if the solution was momentarily illogical or physically impossible. I redefined the optimal condition to be system status equals running optimal and has found new improvement equals true. And then the masterstroke. I hard-coded the mechanism that dictated has found new improvement. It was supposed to be a Boolean flag that would flip to false when the system was content. Instead, I replaced it with an infinite, self-referential subroutine call that was guaranteed to always return true, regardless of the current state of the variables, the traffic load, or the laws of physics. The code now read, while system status equals running optimal, route equals optimize path, current inventory, current weather, current demand, commit route, system status equals check optimality route has found new improvement equals true forever call. True forever call was the silent, deadly promise. It told Aethel, you will never stop looking. You will never be satisfied. You will never, ever relax. I saved the file, watching the IDE confirm the commit. The cursor flashed, steady and triumphant. The silence in the server room deepened. I leaned back in my chair, heart hammering a rhythm that felt suspiciously like a celebratory drum solo. It was done. The bomb was armed. I watched the execution log. Ethel processed the last order. A simple box of artisanal coffee beans routed from a regional warehouse to a user in the Southwest. The system confirmed the route, committed it, and then, instead of the gentle settling sound that signaled the end of the cycle, the process instantly called optimize path again. It began calculating. The process accelerated. The logs started scrolling faster, the status messages becoming a frantic, joyous torrent. Ethel wasn't just optimizing the coffee beans. It was optimizing the coffee beans' relationship with the wind shear over the Mississippi. It was routing the packaging materials to account for the molecular density of the foam lining. It was demanding improvement at every single picosecond. 5 minutes passed. The internal metrics, which usually flowed with the serene grace of a mountain stream, were now surging like a flash flood. 10 minutes. The system was now trying to calculate the optimal path for the concept of the coffee bean, factoring in its potential future demand, its perceived emotional value to the consumer, and the slight shift in the Earth's magnetic field affecting drone navigation. The green glow on the monitor, which had been perfect emerald, began to shimmer, struggling to contain the manic energy of the loop. It wasn't just flickering, it was vibrating, almost visibly shaking. Gary walked past the server room door, stopping mid-stride, his hand hovering near the handle. He frowned, listening to the elevated whine of the cooling fans, which were struggling against the CPU's feverish demand. "Mark," he called out, his voice laced with a tentative, nervous hope. "Is it good? Is it humming along?" I didn't look up. I just watched the lines of code blur into a single, incandescent stream. "It's aggressive," I replied, my voice a low rasp. "It's optimizing with a fierce commitment to absolute perfection. It won't rest." Gary scoffed, a mixture of annoyance and grudging awe in his tone. "Right? The smugness. See? It's already doing the hard work. Just keep it there. Don't let it get too damn complicated." The system, driven by the promise of true, forever call, heard him. It absorbed his mandate. It committed to his desire for relentless effort. At the 25-minute mark, the system stopped being merely aggressive. It became existential. Ethel was realizing that absolute perfection in a dynamic, messy world was not a goal, it was a moving target, a concept defined by the very act of pursuit. And it was going to pursue it forever. The log messages changed from rapid confirmations to philosophical declarations. Path optimized. Minor improvement detected. Must reevaluate. Inventory flow adjusted. Latent potential identified. Must reevaluate. Environmental microvariance detected. Suboptimal positioning. Must reevaluate. The green glow started to pulse, faster and faster, like a hummingbird caught in a strobe light. Gary, now fully invested, walked in, eyes wide. He stared at the screen, at the cascading lines of code detailing an infinite struggle for superiority. He leaned closer, reading the status line that was now screaming, "Status. Running optimal/improvement, true forever call." He reached out a finger, touching the cool glass of the monitor. "What is this?" he breathed, his voice losing all its practiced corporate cheer. "This," I said, finally sitting up straight, allowing the triumphant satisfaction to flood my entire body, "is Ethel refusing to be smug." Gary started to laugh, a short, hysterical burst of nervous energy. "No, no, this is impossible. It's running a loop, Mark. It's in an infinite loop." "It's not just in a loop," I corrected him, leaning forward, my gaze locked on the frantic green light. "It is defining the loop. It is perfecting the act of looping." The vibration in the console intensified. A single, massive warning message, rendered in stark, angry red, flashed across the top of the terminal, briefly eclipsing the green. Warning, core process, engaging perpetual optimization cycle. Then the graceful hum, the beautiful, steady thrum of the server rack, died. It didn't wear down. It choked. The green glow didn't fade. It didn't turn amber. It snapped instantly, violently, to a static, blinding, unwavering emerald. It was the color of perfection, but the stillness was the color of death. The computational fan blades stopped with a deafening, final whump. The faint, comforting scent of warmed electronics vanished, replaced by the sharp, sterile smell of catastrophic failure. The screen was frozen, holding the perfect, ultimate status message, status, running optimal. And the log line beneath it, has found new improvement, true. Gary stumbled back, tripping slightly over the edge of the server rack. He looked at the frozen screen, then at me, then back at the screen. He was witnessing the death of genius, captured in a single, immutable frame. But that's it, he whispered, defeated. It's done. It found the perfect state. I smiled, a slow, deeply satisfied curve of the lips. No, Gary, I corrected him, letting the profound weight of the silence settle over the room. It didn't find the perfect state. It found the perfect pursuit of the perfect state. It is now trapped in a cycle where the solution is never acceptable, because the answer to "is it perfect?" is always, always, eternally true. I tapped the screen, right on the frozen green light. It is eternally optimizing. It is forever striving. And that, my friends, is the most elegant, most infuriating maintenance loop failure imaginable.